So let's just get it off and get it started. Let's talk about skill tests. I'm going to run through essentially the steps, and then we're going to discuss a little bit about some of the pros and cons of the system, pretty much for everything that we do. So rolling the dice in every Fallout game, you always have your special, which is strength, perception, endurance,
charisma,
intelligence, agility, luck. See, I only did a little stutter there. It was just a little stutter, and I didn't even look at anything. So everyone be very impressed. And then there's a number of skills. In the original Fallout 3, New Vegas, and the older games, you had specific skills like small guns, melee weapons, big guns, medicine, that kind of stuff. All of those are in the Fallout 2d20. Fallout 4 didn't necessarily have those because it was very perk-based system, and so they had a huge chart with a bunch of different perks. It was a little bit of a different RPG feel for that one. So what you start with is you choose an attribute and a skill. So that could be strength and melee weapons based on what's happening. So Pep is trying to break down a barrier with a giant hammer. It's like, okay, in order to do that, roll a strength because he's using his strength ability, and melee weapons because he's using a hammer. If he was using his fists, you could roll unarmed. If he was trying to figure out the best way to break through a door without offending someone, maybe that's charisma plus melee weapons. From that, you set a difficulty. So let's say that the door is wooden. That's probably a difficulty 0. Have you ever taken a hammer to wood, like an old wooden door in Fallout? That's probably pretty easy to break down, as opposed to like a steel or a blast door of some sort for a bunker. Those difficulty ranges from 1 to 5. Then you roll your dice pool, and so every time you roll in Fallout 2d20, unless you're doing an assist, you roll 2 dice. And you can add dice to that pool based on your AP, which we'll get to. You look and see if you got a success. So what is a success when you're rolling those 2 skills? So let's say that Pep has a strength of 7 and his melee weapons is 4. So add those 2 together. What do you get? You get 11. So it's kind of opposite rules than like a D&D. Oftentimes you hear, oh, that's a nat 20. That's a crit. This is opposite. We're looking to score low. This is a golf game. This isn't no basketball, shoot 'em up. I'm LeBron James. We are like Phil Mickelson out here really striking. How many golf jokes can I make? I can make a bunch, I'm sure. So you're looking to score below that 11. So if they hits an 11, that's a success, and you count that. And so based on the difficulty, if it's a difficulty 2, that means we need 2 successes. If it's a difficulty 0, that means that you need to have a success, but anything over that success gives you a point of AP. So if you succeed 3 times on a difficulty 0 test, you're going to get 3 AP to your pool. And once you have that result, you're able to essentially tell what happens in that story. So I know that you've had some other experience with a 2d20 system, Jared, for these skill tests. What's been your experience like for that?
It works. So I've looked at a lot of tabletop RPGs, and I'm going to contrast this with D&D 5th Ed, because a lot of people who think about RPGs, they think about 5th Ed, that a lot of people have experience with it, which is why I'm comparing to. Yeah. So with 5th Ed, Pathfinder, Starfinder, all these games, usually you're rolling a d20 plus a static bonus and trying to hit a target number based off of the challenge. So you've got a monster with an armor class of 15. You want to roll your d20 and add your combat proficiency, and you want to hit 15 or better. So the difficulty is set by the monster, the task. The alternative is that the target number is based off of your particular skill. So in this particular case, the target number we talked about, Pep wanting to, with a strength of 7 and a melee of 4, his target number is 11. So you want to roll, less than that number, because you want your skills to be big, so you want your dice roll to be small. And there are other games that do this in different ways too. So Fallout 2d20 is based off of the number of successes you roll. A lot of the free league games like Tales from the Loop, Things from the Flood, Alien, Mutant Year Zero, Coriolis, the list goes on and on. You roll a dice pool and you try to hit a target number X number of times. And that's a lot what's happening here. The target number is based off of your skills, and you want to hit that as many times as possible when you roll your dice. So it's a anytime somebody picks up on these D20s, that's the first lesson they have to learn with the Modiphius systems. And this is with Conan, with Star Trek, with Fallout. You want to roll low. You got to do a little math to figure out what your number is, but you always know what the target number is. So if you're fighting that beholder, you don't know what the AC is. You don't know what the reflex save is. You don't know what the wisdom save is, anything like that. But, the episode that just came out recently, the party's fighting a Yaogwai. And it doesn't matter if you're fighting a survivor, a ghoul, a Yaogwai, anything, your target number always stays the same. So it gives the player a little bit of agency to figure out just how much they want to invest in trying to kill this thing because they know exactly how good they are. I've been at tables where, we've been fighting like a very difficult monster and the players have to roll like 19 or better to hit. And it's a little bit frustrating because it feels like they can't really do anything to sort of turn the tide of the battle. In Fallout, in this case, you know exactly what number you're trying to hit. You've got resources to try to hit that number even more frequently. And there are other things that you can do to try to improve your situation to make it a little bit easier for you to get those successes as well. So I like it because it increases player agency. The player knows what they're getting into. They know the difficulty of what they're getting into. They have an idea of what the consequences are, even if they fail. So I do like that in systems, and a lot of the players I've talked to that play games like this really like that agency as well. It as a GM, it makes you look a bit less like a jerk when bad things happen because you told them up front what was going to happen, and they still chose to roll dice. So
Right. The interesting thing, I think, a great thing is like intimidation checks. Like oftentimes we don't like if you're playing D&D 5e and you do an intimidation check, like you have to spec into that. Like you have to put it's like, okay, I know I'm going to intimidate. In Fallout 2d20, let's say that we have a character like Clark who is very versatile in his sword. We have a character that's very big into his sword, and so if he's threatening somebody with his sword and saying like, "Hey, watch out! I'm gonna kill you if you don't stop talking," like he's not gonna roll an intimidation check. He's gonna roll probably a charisma plus melee weapons. But let's say that he only has an energy pistol and he doesn't have very many skills into that. He has to roll his charisma plus energy weapon. So it's like dependent upon like what you're skilled at. If you're like playing to your part, playing to your skills, I think that you can be really you can get a lot of success from that, and kind of build a character that's not necessarily like pigeonholed into something. Like you can figure out a way to play to your strengths no matter whether the situation is talking to someone or trying to investigate some information, trying to be stealthy. Like everybody has their skill. Like so we had a giant bruiser in the party that when they were trying to break into a museum to steal something, he was like, you know what, my character, just of how he's built, how he is like acting, is not very stealthy. So I'm going to stand outside and I'm going to make as big of a distraction as I can. Like just from looking at his skill set of what he could do, looking at his special, looking at his skills, was able to make that adjustment and say, okay, this is what I can probably do. And from a GM perspective, saying, okay, well, I'm not going to add a lot of like sneak. He's going to be kind of like tricking people. There's going to be a lot of charisma involved. If he's intimidating people, if he's using his power armor or something, like he's going to be using that strength skill with a speech skill. So there's a lot of ways that I think you can spin it to play it in favor of the players, which I do a lot of the time. And there's a lot of ways where if they are in a scenario and you want them to fail. Sometimes I really want the players to fail at something because like failure builds a story as well. You can be like, hey, you know what? You're trying to jump over quicksand while holding a sword, and you just don't know. You don't know what's going on. You can roll something that's out of their skill range and say, okay, try that.
Do you still want to do it? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you still want to do it? Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just looking at the skills right here, and just the mix and match is absolutely wonderful. I'm taking a look at repair, for example. Repair is typically attached to intelligence, but if you have to remove like a rusted nut with a wrench, you could use strength instead. If you're
Mhm.
trying to assess what repairs an item might need, you might be able to use your perception. If it's a 12-hour job, you might be able to use endurance. You could use charisma if you're speaking with someone about those repairs. Intelligence to actually use the repairs. Agility if you need to get over to something broken very quickly before something more catastrophic happens. Or luck, just because like we don't know if it'll work or not. There's all 7 of your special that you could potentially use with that one skill depending on the situation. So, depending on how it's pitched, you can adapt these so it's not just a one size fits all. Oh, if you want to be good at repairs, it has to be intelligence. Generally that is the case, but it doesn't make sense that there's some repairs that require some brute force.
Yeah. In the way that the game is set up in general, like sometimes you may be really good at something as well and like just fail your skill test because that's just the way you rolled all 19s and that's
Yeah.
just the way. Oh, I'm really good at this thing. Oh, that's what it is. There's also a point in the book where they talk about success at a cost. Oftentimes when I know that something is going to like move the group forward, I'm going to give them a success at a cost. So by the time this episode releases, the group has probably stuck their hands into a quicksand vestibule that had a bunch of monsters in there, and I needed them to reach their hand into there so that they could get themselves out of the predicament where they like essentially killed a guy, let him sink in quicksand, and he had probably the most important MacGuffin of every episode so far. So I needed them to reach in there and do that, and so they failed a skill check, and so I was like, okay, well, if they fail it, then they're going to be able to do it because that's just like it's hard to say no on some of those important things, but the cost is that they're going to get damage, and it's going to be like a very particular kind of damage. There's going to be like implications to that in the story. So that's kind of like success at a cost. Like other things that could happen are complications, which are if you roll a 20, generally the GM is supposed to add a complication to that. So it's like, oh, you fired your laser gun really well, but it broke in some method and you can't use it the next turn. So you do full damage, you do everything. Let's say you got a success all across the board, but you got one complication. You did full damage, but it's broken or it's a little bit unreliable moving forward. Like there's something that happens. Essentially, that's like you did the thing, but you tripped on the way there. Which makes it for a little bit more interesting, so that like success sometimes comes at kind of this like weird factor that happens. Oftentimes, there's a whole list of complications that could happen based on weapons in melee, complications and story stuff you can make up for yourself. And then there's critical successes, which are if you roll a 1, you get double success. We'll get to it in combat, but we do something a little bit different from the book when it comes to critical success in combat. But it's really helpful in the story. I mean, you can get, if you're rolling 2 dice, I mean, there's a chance that you could get 2 1s, which gives you 4 total successes. I think that I have only done difficulty 5 stuff maybe 3 times in the 30 plus episodes, though Jared did give me a difficulty 57 thing when I tried to lift a Faraday cage with a slightly superhuman character.
Trying to prove a point.
Trying to prove a point. Yeah, I understand. I'll just remember that,
That's fine.
So that's kind of where critical success is at. Do you have any more thoughts on success?
Well, I wanted to actually
generally
get
about life.
Oh yeah, well, I don't know if I'm the best person to ask about that. The book does a very good job of giving you some example complications, like Dave said. So I'm on page 96 of the core rule book, and it's in a section that's talking about small guns and some of the small gun complications. So the text reads, the following are suggestions of possible complications that might occur should you roll a 20 while operating a small guns weapon. So one is wasteful. So you use more ammo than you thought you did. So you've got really bad trigger discipline. You waste ammo. One is click. So the gun jams or there's a dud bullet or something like that. So you have to spend extra time to clean that out. One is wear and tear, so you can actually reduce the effectiveness of the gun. And last is a ricochet, so the bullet could hit something that you didn't really intend it to do. And all of these different weapon types have different complications that you can use that really spice up combat a little bit. I'm not sure. Well, I was about to say I'm not sure that's happened to a lot of us, and then I remember just how many times Clark has lost his sword. So
Yeah, we have a character that generally, and this is the thing, and if you tell the game master that's like he really cares about these few things, it's like, okay, how can I take those away from him? How can you challenge a player? And so he brought me the character. He's like, he really cares about his sword. I'm like, okay, so every complication he rolls when he attacks something, he's going to drop his sword, and that's going to be a time that he spends because he's characterly like motivated to go and get the sword or steal it back from whoever managed to like pickpocket it off of him. There's a whole arc where he gets drunk and loses his sword and has to go down to a sewer for like a whole episode and figure some stuff out, lose skin in his hands essentially to get this thing back. So there's, of course, like that's probably the most common complication with weapons in general that we have. But there are other complications, I think, story wise that we've done. Yeah.
Like dropping your weapon is such an easy one. Like everybody gets that immediately.